Hello, everyone. Welcome to this time of Bible study. I'm so glad that you're taking the time to study God's Word with me today. Welcome to all of our church members. I hope everyone is doing well. Welcome to friends and family members who are watching this video as well. You know, I talk with people pretty much every day online, people who are feeling discouraged and frustrated with all that's going on related to the COVID shutdown. This is week 28 of the COVID shutdown. Some people have lost jobs. Churches are shut down in many states. In our state of California, for example, churches are still not supposed to meet. There are a few that are doing it, but are not supposed to. So churches are shut down, and we still don't know when we're going to be allowed to meet again. Churches are scheduled to meet in what is called phase 3 in California, and they're talking about phase 2 won't even begin until around the middle of November. So who knows when that's going to be. I know a lot of you are parents and you have children at home. Your children aren't in school. They're studying at home, and that creates a whole set of problems. I've talked to people who are getting relief right now from either rent or their mortgage, but they're worried about balloon payments that are going to come due when they do finally have to start paying their mortgages or paying their rents again. And so there are all sorts of problems that people feel are closing in on them. One day earlier in the week, I began to quote that verse to myself that I quote very often, almost on a daily basis. It's from Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I was so inspired by that. And then I began to think, you know, it has application not just to this day. I always think of that verse in relation to just this day, this 24-hour period. But it occurred to me that it also has application to the broader period of time that we're in. You know, in Hebrew, the Old Testament is written in Hebrew. In Hebrew, just as in English, the word day can refer to a 24-hour period of time, but it can also refer to an era of time, a period of time like that. And it occurred to me that that verse has application for us in this era. We were created for this period of time, and this period of time was created for us. I was so inspired by that thought that I began to read the entire psalm. It's Psalm 118, Martin Luther's favorite psalm, by the way. 29 verses. It's quite a magnificent psalm, very inspirational. And so I decided that for the next few weeks, I'm going to, in a series of messages, I'm going to walk through this psalm with you, verse by verse. Verse 24 is going to be our overarching theme in all of the messages. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. But each week we'll also take a section of the psalm and look at it in a little more detail. So let's do that. I'm in Psalm 118. If you want to read along, I'm going to be reading verses 1 through 4. The psalm begins with the word of gratitude. In verse 1, he says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his steadfast love endures forever." Now, depending upon the translation you're reading, instead of steadfast love, your translation may say his mercy endures forever. It may say his loving kindness endures forever. It may say his everlasting love endures forever. As always, when we see a word like that has so many different translations, it's because there is no single English word that quite captures the meaning of the Hebrew word. This is the Hebrew word hesed. We saw this a few weeks ago in our study of Psalm 92, and there is no English word that perfectly translates hesed. It is not just a feeling. It's more than a feeling. It's more than an emotion. Hesed is one of the most important words in the Bible. It's the Old Testament word for God's covenant love, the love that God holds toward those people with whom he has entered into a covenant agreement. It could easily and accurately be translated into English as God's stubborn love, because that's the idea. It's love that does not give up. It's love that doesn't quit. It's love that is not influenced by the worthiness of the recipient. It's influenced only by the need of the recipient. And so for the psalmist, the thought that God loves him so fully and so completely, so stubbornly, that he loves him even when he, the psalmist, is unworthy. He said, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his steadfast love endures forever." And then the picture of the next few verses, verses 2 through 4, it's a worship setting. I wish we could be part of that right now, because it pictures the temple filled with worshipers. And look at what he says in verse 2. He says, "Let Israel say his steadfast love endures forever." And then he says in verse 3, "Let the house of Aaron say his steadfast love endures forever." Now, Israel in this context would be just the regular people, we might say today, the lay people. He's saying, all of you lay people, all of God's people, say God's love endures forever. His steadfast love endures forever. And then he says to the house of Aaron, they were the priests. Aaron was the original priest. And the house of Aaron are the descendants of the original priests. These are the priests. And so whoever's leading this worship, he says to the priests, let the priests say, God's steadfast love endures forever. And then verse 4, he says, let those who fear the Lord say his steadfast love endures forever. In other words, everybody else who worships God, everyone else who fears and reveres God, let them say his steadfast love endures forever. The psalm begins, and as we're going to see when we get to the end of it in verse 29, it ends with that note of thanksgiving. Verse 29, the last verse, is identical to verse 1. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, and his steadfast love endures forever. Giving thanks is one of the main purposes of the book of Psalms. The writers of the book of Psalms want us to know that in every circumstance, in every situation, and at all times, we are to give thanks to God. Do you want to be happy? You want to have a good attitude? Do you want to be enthusiastic about life? Here's how you do it, the psalmist tells us. Give thanks to the Lord. And that's the first thing I want to say to you today. Develop the practice of giving thanks to the Lord. And by the way, the title of this message, I told you the overarching theme of this message will be from verse 24. This message is, this is the day to give thanks to God in every situation. You know, it's easy to get to where we just enjoy the blessings of God, all of the things that God does for us and gives to us, and just kind of develop a sense of entitlement, you know, like we deserve all that. I was reading recently about a man who had a bagel shop. It was on a busy street corner, and he sold his bagels for 50 cents a piece. And every day a jogger would come running by. And each day when he passed, the jogger would throw 2 quarters into the man's coin basket and keep on running. He did this every day for months. One day, as the jogger was running by, the vendor stopped him. And the jogger said, I suppose you are wondering why I run by every day and throw 50 cents in the basket but never take a bagel. And the vendor said, no, I just wanted to let you know that bagels have gone up to 60 cents. We develop that kind of attitude with God. You know, like everything we have, we deserve it. We just expect to receive good health and material blessings, to have a life free from problems. The psalmist says to us, stop and recognize that God is good, and his steadfast love endures forever, and therefore give thanks to the Lord. Take what God has given you, no matter what it is. Take what God has given you and be thankful. Now, here's the second point, and it's more difficult than the first. The first point is develop a practice of giving thanks to God. The second point is develop the practice of giving thanks to God in every situation. There are two kinds of Christians. There are Christians who are thankful for everything, no matter what. No matter what they go through, no matter what God puts on their plate, they're thankful. And they accept it. And their attitude is good. And then there are those who, they're never satisfied. No matter how their life is going, good or bad, they're always upset. They're always complaining. They're always bitter. They're always angry about something. Which one are you? Which one do you want to be? Look at verse 24 again. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Did you know that the Jewish people sing that psalm during the Passover? That means that Jesus, in all likelihood, sang this psalm, that verse, on the night before he was crucified. Can you imagine Jesus walking to the cross and singing in his mind, this is the day the Lord has made. I will rejoice and be glad in it. If Jesus can do that before he was crucified, can't we do that during the COVID shutdown? You might feel right now that you're not very grateful and your attitude's not very good, but who can blame you? Look at all the problems you have. Look at all that's going on in your life. Did you know that your circumstances have absolutely nothing to do with your attitude? Have nothing to do with whether or not you're thankful. You are 100% in control of your attitude, not your circumstances, not your situation. A pastor friend shared about a woman in his church, 92 years old. Her eyesight was so bad that she was legally blind. She could still see some, but legally she was considered to be blind. In the same year that her husband of 70 years died, it was decided that she would need to be moved into a nursing home to get the kind of constant care that she needed. This was a woman who met every day with a smile on her face, every day with a good attitude. She got up every day and got dressed. She put makeup on, all of those things to approach the day in the right frame of mind. And on the day that her son went to pick her up to drive her to the nursing home, he said she seemed to be in a good frame of mind as they got there, as they drove there. When they arrived, one of the attendants came out into the lobby to meet her, and he was going to walk her to her room. And he began to describe the room to her before they even got to it. And he said, oh, I think you're really going to like it. And he described some of the new renovations that had been done. And he told her, we put new curtains up on the windows for you. And she said, oh, I just love it. And he said to her, well, how do you know if you love it? You haven't seen it yet. And the woman said, whether or not I love it has absolutely nothing to do with what the room looks like. And it has all to do with my attitude. Wow. She's so right, isn't she? It's not your circumstances that determine your attitude. It's you. It's your outlook. And if you want to know why you aren't more thankful, why gratitude doesn't come naturally to you, if you want to know why maybe you're angry all the time, ask yourself what you spend your time thinking about. Because the Bible tells us there's a direct connection between what we think and what we feel. And if you feel depressed and discouraged and demoralized and angry all the time, check your thoughts. Proverbs 23 verse 7 says that as we think in our hearts, so are we. They thought of the heart as we would think of the mind today. It was the place where our thoughts resided. What you spend your time thinking about shows up in your emotions. Now look, I realize this is a difficult time. I'm not trying to make light of that. I'm not trying to gloss over that. This is a difficult time. It's difficult for churches. I read an article recently. There is just a tidal wave of pastors who are resigning from the ministry right now. They feel so frustrated. I know that outside of church, just in normal life, your life, I know people are frustrated with their jobs. They're frustrated at home. Children are frustrated because they're not in school. The financial pressures that people are facing, and on and on and on. I'm not trying to make light of that. Those things are real. But I want you to remember today, this is the day the Lord has made. This day, this 24-hour period of time, and this era in which we find ourselves. God made this, and He made us for it. Accept what God has given you. Acknowledge that He is still in charge. God is still in control. And trust that God is with you today. And as you do that, rejoice, because remember what the psalmist said, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good, and His steadfast love endures forever." I was reading a story this week. It was from the life of a quite well-known English preacher back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. His name was F.W. Barham. The name may not ring a bell. He's often called the most widely read unknown preacher in history. He wrote a lot of books. He's widely read. He's highly regarded in places in the English-speaking world, Australia and New Zealand, and of course his home country of England. Anyway, he told a story, something that happened early in his ministry. He had been invited to preach. It was an anniversary service for a little church in the English town of Sussex. And he went there by train, and he was met at the train station by a farmer in a horse and buggy. The farmer was also the superintendent of the Sunday school. And the farmer took him in his horse and buggy to this little cottage where he was going to be staying. It turned out that the cottage was owned by an elderly widow. She was the widow of a minister, and she was to be his guest for the evening. This was on a Saturday night, and the next day he was going to be preaching at the church. And so he said that he, went to bed that evening. He went into the room and was getting ready for bed, and he looked around and realized he had been given her room. She had given her room to the minister and had taken, I guess, another room in the house, or maybe slept on the sofa. Anyway, so he went to bed that night, and he said he slept, very, very well, and he woke up the next morning. He was invigorated and ready to take on the day, and he walked over to the window and he pulled back the curtains. He was going to open up the window when he saw something on the window. It was writing. And he looked at it, and at first he thought someone had just taken some type of liquid and written something on the window, but he realized on closer inspection that it had actually been carved into the window with a stone or something. And it was 4 words: "This is the day." And when he went downstairs for breakfast, he told the widow what he had seen. And he asked her what it meant. And the widow told him that she had been prone to depression, especially after her husband died. And that she was prone to worry. And she spent every day filled with anxiety. And she said one day she was reading in the Bible, she was reading Psalm 118, and she came to verse 24 and read those words: "This is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And she wondered, well, what day is it talking about? And she read through the psalm trying to find out what day it was talking about. And she realized it didn't mention any particular day. And so she said, to me, that meant every day. Every day is the day that the Lord has made. And then she thought to herself, if God made this day, why should I be afraid? If God made this day, why should I worry? And so she went to visit the glazier in town, people who work with glass. And she had him come to her house and carve those 4 words into her window, so that every day when she got out of bed and pulled back the blinds and opened the window, she would be given that reminder. This is the day. This day, today. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. You can do that too. This is the day to give thanks to the Lord in every situation. Try doing that and see if it doesn't transform your life. I'm so glad that you've taken the time to share with me today. We're going to be going for the next few weeks, verse by verse through this psalm, a different message each week, but all under the heading of This is the Day. So I hope you'll come back next Sunday. All right. Until then, may God bless and keep you.